Massive Devils free agency update. Something that's all about options. Thankfully, the Devils have a good one. Not going to complain too much there. Let's talk about it. Welcome in to Devils Digest. Feel free to click subscribe. Players had their exit interviews after the playoffs concluded earlier this week. Jacob Markstrom spoke. Here's what he had to say about re-signing with the Devils in 2026. That's when his contract's up. If Fitzy is calling, I'm answering. Yeah, I assume they're going to share a few texts. Look, if there's something that Tom Fitzgerald has learned so far about being a general manager and building a team that can be competitive, make the playoffs, and what's not going to make the playoffs, it's goaltending. Look, we saw how much this team changed when they just went in and they brought in, a goaltender who can be a starter, a very good starter, and paired him with a backup who's more than capable, has been a backup on two teams that have been in the Stanley Cup final. He knows he needs goaltending. We saw how much better they were this year with the goaltending. Even though you look at this year's team, maybe not as much offense, didn't have as much scoring. They moved off Tyler Toffoli. Sharon Govich was involved earlier. They didn't focus maybe as much on getting the goal scoring, but they went and got the goalie, and they were a much better team, and they made the playoffs, even with the injuries. So something that Tom Fitzgerald is going to definitely do for the rest of his career is make sure he has a goaltender. And Jacob Markstrom is that goaltender. He's still good. He's reliable. You know what you're going to get out of Jacob Markstrom. I mean, go ahead, look at his stats this season. 949 games, 126 of them. Look, it's maybe a little bit, deflated with the 900. He was one of those players who suffered an injury, and we saw his stats kind of drop a little bit. So I don't think looking at the 900 completely shows the type of season he had. I mean, at one point, probably through the halfway point of this season, he had to have been top 3 in Vezina conversations. Got injured, little bit of a struggle down the stretch, found his game as we got closer to the playoffs, and obviously was their best player in the playoffs. I mean, he kept them in some of those games. That overtime game, Game 5, he was the only reason why that went as far as it did. He was clearly their best player, and that's what the Devils needed to be in that series. Now, obviously, they needed a little bit more because they lost, but they got what they should have gotten out of Jacob Markstrom. Jacob Markstrom provided that. He provided it throughout the season. He was, like I said, halfway point of the season, he was a top 3 goaltender in terms of Vezina, candidate. He gave them what they asked him to give. I mean, obviously, during the offseason, they gave up a little bit to go get Jacob Markstrom because they knew it was a need. They saw what happened last season. Vitek Vanacek struggled, Akira Schmid struggled, Nico Daws probably coming up a little bit too early, and it was kind of, honestly a disaster, to put it frankly. But when you got out of Jacob Markstrom this season, no reason why you wouldn't think about bringing him back. I mean, he's probably going to be cheap. He's going to be 36 years old, 37 at some point that season. I don't see it going much over 2 years. I don't see it going over $4 million per year. So when you look at that, not going to hurt the cap too much, and you get reliability. You get someone who can still play, who can play in the regular season, who can play in the playoffs, who can get hot, who can steal games. You get all that for around, $4 million a year. It makes a lot of sense. It also makes sense when you go ahead, look at the other goalies who are going to be up in 2026. Now, there's really only one name who stands out to me. That's Thatcher Demko. We saw how this year went. Coming off of the injury, they don't know how that's going to necessarily heal. Can't be fixed through surgery. Down year. But when this guy's on, I mean, he's one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. He can steal games. He's still relatively young. He's going to cost you a lot more. Is he a big-time player if he's able to, get past this injury? Absolutely. We're going to see a little bit more this year of where he's at in terms of the injury. Can he come back from it? Will he be, a top goaltender in the league again? It definitely does scare you with how the season went last year and how the surgery or how the injury can't be fixed through surgery. But obviously, when you see a guy like Thatcher Demko, you have to think into it. Now, Anthony Stolarz, I don't see why Toronto doesn't bring him back. I mean, they've been looking for a goaltender for so long. He's been really good for them. I assume they bring him back to Toronto. The rest of them, like I said, nobody really jumps off the page. Sergei Bobrovsky, he's going to be around, 40 years old at that point. Florida might want to bring him back on a cheap deal. I don't really see him probably coming over to the Devils. I think when you look at the options out here in free agency, what you're going to have, a chance to do, Jacob Markstrom probably makes the most sense. He's already here. He's played well. He's shown he can play in the playoffs. He can be a goaltender on a top team. It doesn't really make sense to move off him, especially with the number it's going to be at. Like I said, if Thatcher Demko comes back and looks like a Vezina candidate goaltender, he's going to get a pretty nice contract, okay? Do you really want to be putting that toward your goaltender when you can get, maybe not as good goaltending, but good enough goaltending? You build the rest of your team right. That's what you need. You can spend a little bit in other places. Like I said, there are some players who they're going to have to sign. You're probably hoping you bring over another player from Vancouver and give him a contract. But all in all, Jacob Markstrom wants to be back with the Devils. I don't see why the Devils wouldn't do it, because you look at the free agency next year, there's not a ton there. And Jake Allen probably leaving in the offseason. So right now, you go and you look at their system. Mikhail Yegorov, great season this year at BU. He's young. He's 19. He's not going to be ready to be a full-time NHL starter. Now, is a backup a possibility? Yeah, it's a possibility. Not a starter. But it would be nice, Jacob Markstrom transition off of him into Mikhail Georgiev. So that's a possibility. Nico Daws, obviously up right now with, between the AHL and the NHL. Not a great year, .893. Now, around him, not a lot went right. Utica had a really struggle of a year. Didn't get a ton of help. But like I said, you want to go with your reliability. Jacob Markstrom is reliable. To this point, we really don't know what Nico Daws is yet. I mean, he's a third-round draft pick. He wasn't, a super high. Now, obviously, goalies go a little bit later. But, it's not something where I'd feel comfortable making him the starter, even if next season he comes out and he's great in the backup role. I assume where he's going to fit in next year. Even if he's great in a backup role year one, I still wouldn't feel comfortable. He could have a great season next year. I'm still signing Jacob Markstrom to the 1 or 2 year contract that, he's going to want Tom Fitzgerald. They're going to agree with. I think that makes more sense. Obviously, going over to Yegorov, there's maybe a little bit more upside there. A second-round pick, 927 this year at BU. Looked really good. Won the starting position. Played in a national championship game. He's played well with most places he's gone. So I feel probably a little bit more comfortable with that. Look, I assume they're going to re-sign Jacob Markstrom. 1-2 year deal. Probably won't go over $4 million. Probably won't bleed into the, $4.5. I think probably you can get him around a $4 million contract at 1 or 2 years. That makes sense. Let me know what you think in the comments. You want to see Jacob Markstrom back? What do you want to see them do at goaltender? Nico Daws next year. Jake Allen probably gone. Somebody else in mind that you guys have in free agency for this season. Let me know in the comments. Hopefully you guys hit the subscribe button, and I'll talk to you guys really soon. All right, take care, guys.